Si Ana yun.
Si Ana ba yun?
Oo, si Ana yun.
Pareho kayo ng out.
May nag-worry po kami. Baka mag-back out yung iba naming guest kasi nga po, dahil ng oil spill dito po sa Oriental Mindoro. May mga guests na nagkakaroon po ng confusion. Nagtatanong sila, nako-confuse sila, baka po naabot na kami ng problema ng oil spill.
Hindi pa nga po kami, sir, nakakabawi sa pandemic. Dahil ito lang nga po talagang aming pinagkakakitaan, tapos may ganito na naman pong sitwasyon.
Napakahirap mamuhay, sir, na walang ikakabuhay. Wala po talagang trabaho totally. Anong panahon po ng COVID, ayoko na pong maranasan po ulit iyon.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Gretchen Hall.
And I'm Sean Yao. The big story tonight.
Locals from Puerto Galera who are still recovering from the effects of the pandemic are now fearing for their livelihoods as the oil spill threatens to reach their shores.
The Coast Guard is meanwhile on standby over at the Verde Island Passage, where the oil slick is expected to arrive tomorrow due to the weakening amihan. Mon Gualvez with the big story.
The famous White Beach, water sports activities, and diving sites. These are just some of the claims to fame of Puerto Galera in Oriental Mindoro that tourists, both local or foreign, look forward to in their visits. But all of these are in danger of being shut down temporarily if predictions turn out true that the oil spill from Empty Princess Empress would reach their shores when the northeast monsoon weakens. Livelihood of the people here in Puerto Galera is around 93% dependent on tourism. So if the oil spill reaches their shores, it's highly likely that they will go back to that lockdown scenario during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of them is Ethan, who previously worked on water sports activities before it was forced to a halt by COVID-19.
Napakahirap mamuhay, sir, na walang ikakabuhay. At ayoko na pong maranasan po ulit iyon.
The beach resort Ethan now works for is almost fully booked for the Holy Week. But now, they are worried of what might happen if the oil spill spreads to their waters.
Nag-worry po kami. Baka mag-back out yung iba naming guest.
According to the Tourism Office of the Puerto Galera LGU, some guests have already canceled bookings and reservations even if the oil spill has yet to reach their shores. An even bigger problem awaits marine protected areas and other natural resources that have been preserved for more than 50 years.
Magkakaroon tayo ng setback niyan kasi it will take a very long time to recover.
In response to the looming problem, the LGU has asked for bark and husks of coconuts from barangays. These were thrown into the mill and turned into fillers in nets they've soon to serve as improvised spill booms. But however hard they prepare, the local government admits they really won't be able to cope once the oil slick already reaches their shores.
It's more than epekto ng COVID. Masyadong mahaba yung ng long term talaga yung effect ng oil spill kasi madami kaming mangrove area dito, puro beaches kami.
At the moment, the Philippine Coast Guard is continuously conducting containment procedures not just only in Oriental Mindoro but in other areas affected by the oil spill. They report that the oil slick has already been cleaned in some of the areas as far as Palawan.
Yung sa Palawan, clean na wala na Sa Antique, halos wala na rin. Sa Semirara, nakolekta na rin lahat.
However, seaweed farmers over in Taytay, Palawan report that they are still suffering from the oil slick. They are now coordinating with the LGU on possible assistance for affected farmers. Meanwhile, the PCG Southern Tagalog District is also on standby at the Verde Island Passage where the oil is predicted to arrive by tomorrow, according to the UP Marine Science Institute.
As the winds change po, the direction of the flow will also change. And that's when the Verde Island Passage should be the most vulnerable.
The remote-operated vessel, or REV contracted from Japan, is slated to arrive March 20. But equipment that should help contain the leaking oil is expected to arrive much later. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
The Philippines is appealing to the International Criminal Court to suspend its investigation into the Duterte administration's war on drugs. In its appeal, the Office of the Solicitor General insisted that the tribunal has no jurisdiction over the Philippines since it withdrew membership in 2019. The OSG also claimed that the ICC prosecution is not authorized to conduct an investigation. The ICC resumed its inquiry into the drug war in January after its pre-trial chamber said that it was not satisfied with the country's efforts in investigating alleged human rights violations during the Duterte administration.
Meanwhile, former directors of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency are denying reports that a 30% cut on confiscated drugs is being given to informants. In a Senate hearing today, former PDEA chief said that there were no such incidents during their time in office. This is after PDEA Director General Virgilio Lazo reported that informants would sometimes ask for a 30 to 70% cut on seized narcotics, claiming that it's a long-standing practice in the agency.
Masakit, sir, yung divulge. Kasi, sir, ang haba ng trabaho natin eh. 20 years ako sa PDEA. And never naging kalakal namin yan, sir. Kung mangyari sa akin yun, pupusasan ko talaga yung dalawa na yun, kung sino man yung mga tao na yun. Kasi parang kakapal ng mukha, sir eh. Parang ang lakas ng loob lumapit sa isang Director General to make an offer at 30%. Parang hindi tama eh.
The recycling of confiscated illegal drugs is not exactly new at this point. However, lawmakers are now concerned whether there is a need to amend existing laws given this alleged commission scheme. Here's what we know. PDEA revealed the scheme in a House hearing last month. Back then, the agency said that informants were asking for a 30% cut on the seized drug loot. Under the 2002 Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act, cash rewards for tipsters should be less than the profit that could be gained from the illegal drug trade. Reports of drug recycling also made headlines in 2019 after a Senate Blue Ribbon probe found that police officials allegedly kept some 200 kilos of illegal drugs that were seized in a drug bust in Pampanga back in 2013. If we look at the numbers, PDEA says that authorities were able to seize over 89 billion pesos worth of illegal drugs during the term of former President Rodrigo Duterte. This includes over 9,000 kilos of shabu. And if around 30% of the total haul went to informants, it would mean that these tipsters earned billions of pesos from the seizure as well. This year, the PNP said it was able to confiscate 1.2 billion pesos worth of illegal drugs. How much of it went to informants? And if the alleged bust cut is true, how much of these drugs went back out into the streets?
After the break, the U.S. and the Philippines are set to hold their biggest joint military drills yet amid heightened tensions with China. Political analyst Richard Heydarian joins us for a discussion on this. When the big story returns, keep it here on One News. the big story here on One News. The Philippines and the United States will hold their largest Balikatan exercise this year, with 17,600 troops expected to participate in the annual combined joint exercise in April. About 12,000 U.S. troops and 111 more from the Australian Defense Force will participate in this year's exercises, along with 5,000 Philippine soldiers. The exercise is scheduled to take place from April 11 to 28, will be held in areas in northern Luzon, Palawan, and Antique. A team from Japan was also expected to observe this year's joint exercises. AFP Balikatan spokesperson Colonel Michael Lohico said Japan would stay as an observer this year because Manila and Tokyo do not have a status of forces agreement. Lohico said new exercises to be featured in Balikatan 2023 include cyber defense exercises and live fire exercises at sea, where joint U.S. and Philippine forces will try and sink a vessel for the first time. Previous joint exercises, usually held in land-based sites, mostly involved the Army and the Air Force. Also a first will be the deployment of the U.S. Patriot missile system and other U.S. Air Force assets which have not participated in Balikatan before. Now, the Philippine Army has been shifting its focus to territorial defense from insurgency amid China's increasing assertiveness in the South China Sea and its potential invasion of Taiwan.
Let's discuss the upcoming Balikatan 2023 further. We have with us live via Zoom political analyst and senior lecturer at the Asian Center of the University of the Philippines, Richard Haydarian. Richard, good evening and welcome again to The Big Story. Richard, we're looking at the biggest Balikatan ever with almost 17,000 troops. Again, as Gretchen said, so many new equipment, a shift again from land to sea. What kind of message does this send to China?
Huge in many senses of the word. I mean, first of all, the Balikatan last year was already billed as one of the biggest on record, and I think that had around 8,900 participants. This year is going to be double that almost. We're looking at 17,000 plus troops. 12,000 of that will come from the United States, 5,000 from the Philippines, and then a few hundred from our other like-minded partners and allies, especially Australia, which has a status of forces agreement also with the Philippines, not to mention observers from Japan. Now, the thing is, just this week, we had the Salaknip exercises, which means, of course, shield in Ilocano. And this was also important because we had island defense or archipelagic defense exercises. And in fact, we were applying lessons from Ukraine, how Ukraine used advanced missile systems and weaponries to beat back a giant like Russia. We're already applying that in the case of defending the Philippines if ever there's an invasion of Luzon or key islands of the Philippines. And then, of course, that sets a tone for the massive exercises in April for almost 2 weeks that will run with the Americans. Now, there again, we're going to have a first. And the first is not only the size, more than 17,000, of course, size matters, it's important, but we're also looking here at certain war games, including war games near the Panatag Shoal or Scarborough Shoal, where we are going to exercise, sinking boats. So obviously, we know who's the target of these exercises, especially the country that actually now has administrative control over Scarborough Shoal, namely China, since 2012. So we're entering new waters here. So literally new waters here, and figuratively. Just the other day, actually, on March 30, the United States launched effectively this new nuclear-powered submarine deal with its allies, United Kingdom and Australia. And now it's also doubling down its alliance with the Philippines. In fact, I said if there's an AUKUS, there's also an emerging JAFUS, which is Japan, Philippines, and United States Trilateral Alliance. All of these have to do in one way or another, either with the West Philippine Sea disputes and increasingly with Taiwan. We know based on our conversation with very well-informed people from inside that initially they wanted to have some of these exercises of Balikatan in Ilocos region, but there was some opposition to that and sensitivity to that because that was too close to Taiwan. So we pushed it down to Zambales. But nonetheless, the message is very clear to China. We're preparing for even a potential war. And the best way to prevent war is preparing for it. So this is really about deterrence.
Just taking a look at what's happening now, who do you think has to benefit the most from these drills? And where does that put the Philippines in terms of, the independent foreign policy of the Marcos administration trying to balance things between China and the U.S.? Does this put us towards the United States?
Right, and that's a great question. I mean, if you listen to Marcos Jr. during the presidential campaign, right, he sounded very different. In fact, it sounded more like former President Duterte and sounded more like his sister, Senator Amy Marcos. This idea that we don't want to be involved in the supposed intramural of superpowers, we have to be neutral. He barely talked about the U.S. alliance, but here we are. 1 year into his presidency, has doubled down big time on our alliance with the United States. I would say that's partly because he's inspired by his own father's policy back in the day during the Cold War, when he maintained strong alliance with the United States while reaching out to China and others. But the bigger reasons, I would say, Gretchen, is that if you look at his visit to China in January, really nothing came out of that. I mean, seriously, I mean, there was no concessions from China on the billions of dollars of imaginary investments they were supposed to have in the Philippines. They just mentioned some bridge project in Davao. That's it. Nothing about high-speed railway, big-ticket infrastructure projects. But more importantly, we can clearly see President Marcos Jr. was kind of tortured when he wanted to explain what concession he got on the West Philippine Sea. Barely anything. Just like a recognition by President Xi Jinping supposedly na dapat tulungan natin yung ating mga isda or something like that, right? So he got nothing really from China on the most important issues, which is West Philippine Sea and infrastructure investment. And I think that made him more interested in pivoting back to our traditional allies. But as I said, Gretchen and Sean, pwede pa i-dribble yan, you know? Where we're going to conduct our exercises, how big is going to be the access of American troops under EDCA, which bases we're going to open in Isabela, Cagayan, considering that the provincial governors there are against it. Pwede dribble lahat yan. Those are going to be things that we're going to tweak. So the menu is there, which is an EDCA, expanded EDCA. But the ingredients that we put into the dishes into this menu, lulutuin pa yan. So we can still do a lot of things around it. My argument is that far from provoking China, this actually gives the Philippines leverage. Because now the Philippines can go to China and say, hey, if you're not going to give me any concessions, I'm just going to tighten the noose and go more and more into a U.S.-led alliance with this JAFOS. I'm going to help with AUKUS. I'm going to cooperate with Australia. But maybe if you give me more concessions, then maybe next year's EDCA will not be as aggressive and not as much about preparing for a potential war with you. So I think the Philippines is in a strategic sweet spot. And let's see how President Marcos Jr. will make the most out of this.
All right, like you said, dami pang pwedeng i-dribble dyan. We'll, I guess, be speaking with you as the game goes on. Thank you so much for your time. Richard Haydarian, Senior Lecturer over at the Asian Center of the University of the Philippines. Thank you. And the Justice Department is creating a special panel of prosecutors that will be focusing on cases related to the killing of Negros Oriental Governor Roel Degamo. Meanwhile, the family of Congressman Arnie Teves believes that he is being dragged into the case not because of political reasons, but because of a business feud. Here's the report.
The House Committee on Ethics is investigating the absence of Negros Oriental Representative Arnie Teves without official leave. Members want to determine if Teves violated any rule of the House of Representatives and if they should impose disciplinary actions against the lawmaker.
Options dito, of course, we are on the administrative aspect to really recommend whatever disciplinary actions. Usually, gano'n naman, no? May suspension, pero kung come to worse, may expulsion at saka traffic controls.
Based on Teves' travel authority, he left the country for the United States on February 28 for a personal trip. His travel authority expired on March 9, which means he should have been present in Congress by then. But until now, Teves remains a no-show. Congress is giving Teves 5 days to explain his expired travel authority. Teves' absence, meanwhile, comes on the back of his being tagged in the killing of Negros Oriental Governor Roel Degamo and 8 others. Teves' lawyer says his client is fearing for his safety. The Teves family believes that accusations against the congressman rooted from a business feud and not politics. Teves is allegedly linked to gambling operations in Negros Oriental.
I don't think it's political because politically wala nang motive eh. But when it's business, on the business side, and just political, it's money-wise.
The family refused to drop names but said that a supposed gambling lord from Luzon wants to enter the Negros Oriental market. The Teves family suspects that the Gamo sleigh is only being used by Teves' rivals. The PNP Special Investigation Task Group says they will look into this angle in their investigation.
Sa start na yan, consider of course, sabi na everything was considered at the start. Pero as the investigation unfolds, it narrowed down to political rivalry, personal grudge.
Meanwhile, President Marcos has instructed the Justice Department to create a special panel of prosecutors that will focus on the Degamo case. Justice Secretary Boying Remulla says they will look into over 20 cases of killing in Negros Oriental where a pattern of impunity is observed. Remulla says they already have a list of persons of interest.
No special instructions, but of course the cases are there. That's an instruction of the President to make sure that a panel that's skilled at this level is already there to evaluate the cases so that no stones will be left unturned.
Aryan Kalumbiran, we are One News.
7 members of the Tau Gamma Phi fraternity for the alleged death by hazing of John Matthew Salinig. State prosecutors found probable cause to charge 7 Tau Gamma Phi fraternity members from Adamson University for violating the anti-hazing law of 2018. These are Earl Romero, Tung Cheng Teng Jr., Jerome Ochoco Balot, Sandro Victorino, Michael Ricalde, Mark Munoz Pedrosa, and Daniel Perry. The DOJ will also file 2 separate criminal information against the suspects for violation of the Act prohibiting violent initiation rights.
Right after the break, the Philippine National Police has gone digital in stopping the data or storing the data of law offenders. We'll find out more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Police stations across the country could soon have a faster turnaround time in finding law offenders with its new eBooking system. This new system allows for easier access to fingerprint records and other criminal data. It also is linked to the PNP's National Police Clearance System. The National Police said they are hoping to roll out this new system nationwide as soon as possible. This is to help fast-track cross-matching procedures and do away with the hassle of manually searching through piles of physical records. According to the PNP, at least 800 crime suspects undergo booking procedures in police stations every day. That is on top of the 15,000 people who apply for police clearance on a daily basis. To discuss this new e-booking system further, we have with us on the line Major General Eliseo Cruz, PNP Director for Investigation and Detective Management. Welcome to the big story, sir. Sir, can you tell us about this system and which particular system have already been integrated into it so far? And are we looking for further integration?
Good evening, Gretchen, and to all your viewers. This new project of the PNP Directorate for Investigation and Detective Management is another solution to our crime prevention and crime solution effort. Because we believe that physical evidence taken from the crime scene are more important in solution of the cases that we handle. So we come up with a digitalized scanning of fingerprints, because fingerprints, as we all know, are the basic physical evidence that we get from the crime scene. So before, when we arrest criminals, they are subjected into booking, and we are using what we call 10 print cards. This is a hard copy of fingerprints, which are being scanned by the forensic group to upload into their database. And when we leave fingerprint from the crime scene, this is being compared to the thousands of fingerprints stored in our database. So, naisip namin to make it digitalized, yung pagkuha ng mga fingerprints sa mga suspects. And also, we are issuing at least 15,000 national police clearances nationwide to our police stations, to our clients. And we are taking their fingerprints and being stored into the database. So, and also on the average, the PNP now is at least arresting 800 people or 800 wanted criminals daily. And these fingerprints are being taken from them, being stored in our database. So napakalaki ng ating potential na makakompare tayo, makapag-match tayo ng mga latent prints taken from the crime scene and then being compared to our database of fingerprints. So now we are calling this booking system, we call it booking to arrested criminals. So tinawag na natin itong eBooking because the photos are being taken digitally, the fingerprints are being taken digitally, and the information of arrested suspects are being uploaded digitally.
Sir,
so mabilis
sir, can
ang
you talk to
pag-compare
us
natin.
a little bit about the access to this e-booking system? Can this be accessed by the public? Is it only at police stations, or is there an available remote access for it?
No, it's only the investigators who can access this system. Dahil, of course, there's no need for the public to access this. Dahil ito ay part of our investigation. Sabi ko nga kanina, in the scene of the crime operation, number one na kinukuha namin dyan ay yung mga fingerprints sa mga as physical evidence. And then we need to identify who owns these fingerprints. Kaya meron tayong mga database of fingerprints taken from arrested criminals and of course yung mga kumuha sa atin ng mga police clearance. Because we believe that for those who apply for police clearance, there's a possibility that in the future they can commit crimes. Kaya kinukuha rin natin yung mga fingerprints mula, yung mga standard fingerprint. So napakahalaga nito sa crime solution effort ng ating investigation. At in the future, if there will be more and more fingerprint databases or fingerprints into our database, there will be a bigger chance of solving crimes using the physical evidence from the crime scene, which is the fingerprint.
All right. Looking forward to a more efficient delivery of service and, of course, settling of cases. Thank you so much for your time. Major General Eliseo Cruz, PNP Director for Investigation and Detective Management. And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analyses. I'm Sean Yao.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make your free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.